This is the Rocketry Show's coverage of the NAR sold-out NARCON 2017 convention.
Hey everybody, it's Daniel the Rocket Noob, and we're here with the Rocketry Show at NARCON 2017. And we're currently at the Udvar Hazy Center for the National Air and Space Museum. If you remember our previous podcast, we talked to Dr. Jennifer Lavasser of the Smithsonian Institution, and she told us all about this place. As a matter of fact, behind me, if you look, you can see Space Shuttle Discovery, which was kind of the workhorse of the fleet, flew in space, I believe, more times than any other. One of the things that Dr. Lavasser mentioned is that it looks like it just came out of space and basically came to a stop and parked. And if you look at it, you can see it is very dirty. It's like a lot of cars that I've owned. This is basically a room full of spacecraft, and it's basically open to the public, and a lot of us at NARCON are going to come check this place out. CG and I are here a little early because we wanted to come and talk to you about a few things. We just walked through a hangar full of airplanes, and I'm kind of freaking out right now because this whole place is like a toy store for me, but like really big toys. That's where we are. NARCON 2017 is my first one. You can tell I'm pretty excited. So, yeah, that's it. All right, well, we are right here by Space Shuttle Discovery, workhorse of the fleet. We're about 7 feet away from it. It's really interesting. If you look at the tiles, they look really dusty. They look marked up with reentry gases, and you can see streaks from, it looks like if you were building a model, you would airbrush that on. All the tiles have little serial numbers on them. It's really interesting. Yeah, it's like you could almost touch it. If it weren't for the fact that it would be a very bad idea and you'd get kicked out. But it's just astonishing. When you first come into the Udvar Hazy Center, you can look to the back and you can see it. But because of the low lighting in here, when I first came in, I didn't think that this was actually the shuttle. I thought what I was seeing was a painting on the door to the room with the shuttle. But it was looking right at it. It's really fantastic. And the great thing about this is I could take all these pictures. So if I ever build on a scale model, I'll have lots of material to work with. I don't really know what else to say at this point. Over here we got the Canada arm. If you want to follow me here. Of course, our Canadian Rocketeers know that everyone in Canada knows that certain things come from Canada. Shania Twain, Eggs Benedict, and the Canada arm. Actually, I don't know if Eggs Benedict come from Canada, but the Canadian bacon definitely does. But the Canada arm, which flew on the space shuttle many times, was used for deploying payloads. Big source of pride in Canada. The giant arm there, robotic arm, and was responsible for deploying all sorts of payloads, from military to commercial to, I believe, the Hubble Space Telescope was surely dragged out of there by some kind of arm device, most likely made in Canada. And here it is. All right. Okay, so we're underneath Discovery right now, underneath the back end of it. And if you look up, you can see the tiles really, really closely, and you see all these little circles, and I forget what those circles are for. They either have to do with the manufacturer or with a tool that placed them in place. But what's really interesting is because of the texture all of them have, you can see each one of them has a little streak coming off of it from reentry. And whereas they used to be black, a lot of them have gone ash white. Some of them have turned sort of a rust red, and they all have they're all just different colors. In fact, some of them look a little bit like a sort of a, it looks like a really cool tile you'd want in a nice bathroom. You know what I mean? Like a nice bathroom tile, a nice kind of earth tone. But that's all from the plasma of reentry. It's so cool. And over here, we got the gas tank, the liquid oxygen and the liquid hydrogen ports. CG just pointed those out to me. That's gonna cost a lot for a trip. Okay, so here we have the spacesuit of astronaut James Irwin, who was on Apollo 15. And if you look really closely, I'm not sure you'll be able to see this on camera, but it is covered in lunar dust. And this is something that Dr. Levasseur talked to us about. They try and keep, the way they do things now is they try and keep things the way they were. So they didn't want to clean off any of this dust. This looks very familiar to me. I've had a lot of laundry that looks like this. Especially after a few washes with colors, mixing your whites and your colors, then you tend to get this. But this is actually actual lunar dust. No tide, no bounce on this guy here. I believe this is the suit worn by the astronaut who actually drove the lunar rover. And yeah, it's pretty cool to see this stuff in person. We got a lot of gloves over here, a lot of different gloves, extravehicular gloves. We got some worn by Joe Engel and Edgar Mitchell. Got a little tiny helmet up here worn by Gordon Cooper. And of course, we've got a shovel down here for digging your lunar latrine with. And that's it's very important to have some place to do your business on the moon, of course. All right, guys, so here's something that when we talked about it on the podcast, I admit I wasn't that interested until I just saw the size of it. This is the last remaining Sirius FM satellite radio satellite, and it's huge. It's huge. Not only is it really big, it looks so expensive to get into orbit because it's so big. I don't know what you would have launched this guy on, but these solar panels would have spread out to, if you look at the picture here, would have spread out to like 6 times the width of this satellite. And I just can't, I was like, okay, it's a satellite radio, people listen to Howard Stern on satellite radio. That's great. But it's huge. It's huge. We're standing next to something called a Standard Missile 3. It's a Navy missile, and the thing I wanted to point out is it looks similar to a North Coast Rocketry SA-14 Archer, which is Jeem's favorite rocket, and I have one that I'm working on right now. The SA-14 Archer is, as a kit, it's not actually a scale model, but it's meant to represent what a Navy missile might look like, and it's got those strakes on it. It's got the fins. One of the things I find really interesting is it's not, I like to shape my fins, and it's not, obviously the SA-14 Archer isn't a scale model, so there's no real missile to base it off of. But if you look at the fins, they have a bit of a beveled edge, and then the actual edges, they're not sharp, they're just rounded. The forward, the leading and trailing edges are rounded a little bit, which is as the kit instructions say. And I was thinking, well, if you want to make it realistic, you probably need to make them sharp, but that's not necessarily the case. Right next to it, we have the Patriot missile. This was it was basically an anti-missile missile, and it's a very popular Estes kit. I think Mad Cow also makes one. It's actually not that big. I'm surprised. It would be easy to, I think, to build. Well, easy. That's not, I shouldn't say easy, but it would be quite conceivable to be able to do a level 3 full-scale edition of this. Now, what I find interesting is, so I'm building the Estes kit right now, because I can't leave well enough alone. One of the things I'm trying to work on is shaping my fins. Even though I'm not really in love with the Patriot rocket, I wanted to play around with it. So what I've been doing is I've been playing around with shaping the fins. The kit, the fins are a little thin, and I thought they had sort of a beveled leading edge and a beveled trailing edge, but they actually have a sort of a diamond cross-section. One of the cool things about coming to a museum like this is I can actually take photographs, close-up photographs, and get the information that I'm looking for. And now that I see it, I have no idea how I'm going to make that shape because it's a little complicated looking. What I was working on was looking pretty good, but was not quite that diamond cross-section. So I'm going to have to work on my sanding technique. But again, while it is diamond shaped, if you look at the actual edge, it's square. So there's a section of probably about a quarter of an inch at the leading edge of the fin, which is not sharp. Of course, that's because it's a full-size missile and not a scale kit. Also, one of the interesting things, which you may or may not know if you were a Patriot fan, is the fins are not actually attached. They have a little sort of a lever, and I believe this is for guidance. So they're attached at one point at the base of the fin, at the root of the fin, basically, rather than fixed to the side. It is a guided missile. Okay, so this is really exciting for me because I went to a couple of space centers when I was a kid. I went to Grissom Air Force Base for an air show. I went to the Kennedy Space Center when I was a kid. And I went to the Kennedy Space Center several years ago when I lived in Florida. But I wasn't a Rocketeer at that point. And so I just love the fact that coming here, I can be close up to these things and look at the detail. And what we have right behind us is a Nike Cajun. You got a Nike booster, much like the very popular Nike Smoke Rocket, and a Cajun sustainer. And this looks very similar to what the Estes has come out with recently, re-released, the Nike Ajax. And again, I'm looking at the cross sections of the fins here, and so I have the Nike Smoke Pro Series 2 kit, and what I find really interesting is that these fins look exactly like it. They're radially tapered. They have beveled edges, and the bevel, because of the radial taper, gets a little narrower from the root to the tip. But it's not a diamond cross section, so you just have the edges there, and that's exciting to me because I've figured out how to do that by hand with balsa, so I know that I can make that fin if I want to, which is cool because and then of course the metallic sustainer up there looks very, very sharp because the edges are just beveled to a sharp point, and you wouldn't want to touch that even if they'd let you. And I've just noticed that I'm looking up and going, oh, what's that? What's that? And I'm looking at the pillars holding up the roof, and that's what that is.
The NARCON 2017 video edition of the Rocketry Show is brought to you by North Coast Rocketry, makers of premier high-power rocket kits that are easy to build, fun to fly, and look great on display. InsaneRocketry.com, makers of the Insane Rockets app. Look for it today in the Google Play Store. Serious Rocketry, makers of kits that are more than just 3 fins and a nose cone. Visit their website at siriusrocketry.biz and .com. Serious Rocketry, for the serious Rocketeer. And also by loyal listeners like you. Kick in as little as $1 per show to help fund the Rocketry Show's coverage of the hobby rocketry scene. Visit our Patreon site at patreon.com/therocket.
Okay, I'd like to describe this full-scale rocket of a Black Brant Mark V launch vehicle that the NASA Sounding Rocket Program uses as one of its workhorse rocket motors for various rockets we fly in pursuit of science and technology development. It's part of either a single-stage application or all the way up to a 4-stage application. So what we have in this configuration is the forward silver portion is what we define as the payload of the rocket, which includes subsystems like telemetry and recovery systems and separation systems, but also contains the experiment. This is actually a relatively small version of a payload. These payloads can actually be about 20 feet long, weigh up to 1,500 pounds to 2,000 pounds. They can get very large. Back behind is the black portion is the Black Brant rocket motor itself. It's a solid propellant rocket motor, which is fin stabilized. Again, it primarily serves as a second or third stage to multi-stage rocket configurations. If you look at the under the yellow strap, it's a little difficult to see, but if you get a close-in zoom of that, it's actually cables wrapped around the body with some brass weights in a slot. That is actually a D-spin system. But actually, when we want to stop the rocket from spinning once it gets outside the atmosphere, we deploy those cables, that weight unwraps, and it stops the payload from spinning. It's called a D-spin system. To try to make sure the rocket flies appropriately, we have canted fins on the back end for every stage. Aerodynamically, that causes the rocket to spin up. And so we actually spin up to anywhere from 4 to 5 hertz. However, the scientists either want to be spinning at a 0 spin rate for a telescope mission or maybe a half a hertz or 1 hertz for a plasma physics type experiment, so we have to stop the spinning of the rocket once it gets outside the atmosphere, hence the D-spin system. Highly performing rocket, average thrust is about 15,000 pounds of thrust. Peak thrust is roughly 24,000 pounds, burns for about 33 seconds, and has a total impulse of around 600,000 pound-seconds of total impulse, so a pretty hefty motor, a workhorse for our program.
Hey everybody, it's Daniel the Rocket Noob with the Rocketry Show, and we are at NARCON 2017. We're currently in the vendors room, which is very exciting. We have a couple of vendors here who are premiering some new products, including North Coast Rocketry and Aerotech. They've got some new things they're going to talk to us about. We also have we have E-Rockets here. They of course do the Semrock line of rockets now, along with a lot of other things. Aerospace Specialty Products, also known as ASP, is over in the corner here. They do a lot of great kits and supplies, fantastic stuff. We've got Aerotech over here to your left, my right. And, of course, Dr. Zuch, who does ant scale, sport scale stuff, and is a really interesting guy. We've even got Rocket Golf in the background. And, of course, we have, you can also pick up from Cosmic Ties and Vests your Neil deGrasse Tyson costume, if that's what you're in the market for. Out front, which we'll probably show you in a little bit, there is an actual Black Brant sounding rocket, which prompted the FBI to call the police, because that looked a little suspicious, a giant rocket outside of a hotel. But everything was cleared up, and it's been a fun time here at NARCON so far. We're at the Dr. Zuch booth with Wes Olszewski, Dr. Zuch himself, or the creator of Dr. Zuch. Hey, Wes.
Hello.
And we've got some models here and some books. So, Wes, why don't you tell us first of all how you came up with this Dr. Zuch character and why you decided to make Dr. Zuch the name of your rocket company?
Well, that's from the cartoonist side of me. I held a cartoon strip called Clyde Morris that is about aviation, aerospace events, and it's kind of an editorial cartoon. Gets me in a lot of trouble. And along the way, I came up with sort of a fun cartoon strip that involves ants as characters, and it's called The Program. And in the program, they are the most incompetent spaceflight programs you can imagine. So what I've done is I had to create characters, and one of them is called Dr. Zuch, who is the technical guy. And when people ask him what is he a doctor of, he's a doctor of pathology. So you can guess the way that the program cartoon goes along. People blow up, or ants blow up, and things blow up, and things go wrong. They miss decimal points, and horrible things happen. And then when it came time to make the rocket company, I was looking for a name, and it's good to either be on the beginning of the alphabet or the end of the alphabet. Well, the beginning of the alphabet in rocketry, model rocketry, is pretty much taken. So I went to the end of the alphabet, and I used Dr. Zuch because Z is at the end of the alphabet. Not only that, I currently hold the copyright to the character. So I could use the character wherever I wanted, and I put them in the program, or in the instructions, so that you could read the instructions, see the cartoon strip, and laugh along with Dr. Zuch. So I put a lot of comic stuff into the reading of the instructions. It keeps people reading the instructions instead of just looking at the pictures.
That's great, and you make a number of challenging models. They're on the smaller side. Why don't you tell us a little bit about why you decided to go the direction you did with your rocket company, and tell us a little bit about your philosophy behind that.
Okay. When I was a kid, my best friend Jeff Vanston, he goes by CJ Vanston now, and he's a famous musician out in LA. He and I launched rockets together, and we agreed that we would someday have our own rocket company, but we were only going to make the tough rockets, the ones that were really cool. In later years, as an author, my wife and I had a child, and I was the stay-at-home dad. And you can't really write author books when you're at home with an infant. There's just no downtime where you can sit and focus. So I told my publisher he wouldn't get anything from me for about 2 years, and I concentrated on raising a daughter. In the meantime, I needed something to do with my hands. So I decided to start building some model rockets, and I was at a rocket launch for the Maryland-Delaware Rocketry Association, and I had one of my rockets on display on my table, and a guy came along and said, "Have you ever thought of kitting these?" And I said, "I don't think I'd do that." And I was telling my wife that story. She's a big business head, and she said, "Maybe you should think about that." And I said, "Well, I don't really think I want to go into that." She said, "Let's run the numbers." So we ran the numbers, and it turned out I could probably do this. And with the help of Tim Van Milligan, who runs Apogee Rockets, who went to Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University with me and was on the Avion newspaper with me at the university, he helped me get into where I could get the parts from and where I could get the boxes from and so on. Pat McCarthy over here, who's with Space Florida and is over here marketing some vests with his wife, he has been in NAR forever, and he helped me get around in the rocketry community, which had changed a lot since the 70s when my friend Jeff and I first came up with this concept. I started marketing these rockets, and we came to NARAM out here in Virginia. And I set up my table, and I set up my 4 kits. Before I got the first kits out on display, somebody came along and said, "Are you selling these?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "I'll take one of each." And
Very nice.
the next person came along after I had things set up and said, "Are you selling these?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "I'll take one of each." And that was at 10:30 in the morning. By 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I had sold out everything I brought, and I had a roll of cash with me. And I got home that night, and I told my wife, "I think we have something here."
Wow. Well, they're on the smaller side, and they're very challenging, but they're affordable. I think that's kind of what you're going for, isn't it?
That was the key, is to keep things affordable. I wanted to keep it so that a kid in middle school could afford, out of what they're making cutting lawns or on their allowance, to get one of my kits and make it. They're not all completely challenging. Some of them are a lot easier than they look. The Saturn V, that is modeled after the Estes K39 Saturn V, it looks like it's a hard kit, especially building the F1 engines, but people will tell me after they built the first one, they went, "Oh, there's nothing to this," and they built the others. So in a way, they're challenging, in a way they're not. A lot of the kits are designed so they take very little painting. In the Titan 3C, for example, there's almost no painting involved at all, just for the nose cones, essentially, and for the flame fins, which are my own invention.
Yeah, and the flame things, that's your way of getting around needing fins, right?
Well, it's a way of disguising fins to look like flame, and they also double as a stand for the rocket.
Yeah, they do, and a couple of them. You've got your space shuttle here, and I have to say, if you've never seen a Dr. Zhuch space shuttle fly, the orbiter actually comes off and glides in, and it glides very, very well, and it tends to get applause, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. It's the only kit I've ever built that when part of it returns, it gets applause from the audience. And some of these orbiters really like to show off. A friend of mine had one that took off, and when it came back in, it circled and it came right over his easy up and landed behind us. I had one that circled a little bit and flew straight down the line of easy ups in front of the entire crowd and landed as good as can be. On the other hand, I had another one that circled around and headed straight for the porta potty. And just before it got there, a guy stepped out of the porta potty and held the door open, and I thought it was going in for sure. And it hit a little gust of wind and went down on the ground just short of there.
Well, I remember the very first time I saw one fly. I was actually on launch control duty, which is something I was kind of new to, and I was underneath an easy up. So I saw the boost go up, and then I heard everyone gasp, and I said, "What's going on?" Because I couldn't see. So I ducked, and I said, "Oh my gosh, it's gliding!" And it just sort of looped around and landed really close to the launch control table. It was beautiful, and everyone applauded. So
yeah. The very first shuttle that I made, the prototype, was flown for the first time at Novar. And I went out to one of their launch because my MDRA launch had been rained out. So the next week was a Novar launch, and I wanted to get this thing going. So I got out here, and I put it on the pad, and they put it on pad 13, believe it or not. And then I stepped back, and they pushed the button, and up it went, and it flew perfectly. And then I tried it on 2 other engines of different sizes to make sure it would fly consistently, and I called my wife at home, and I said, "The darn thing flew." and it flew really well. And she said, good, now you'll finally get some sleep tonight, because I'd been agonizing over it for about a month.
Well, one last thing. Why don't you tell us about your book series?
The book series is called Growing Up with Spaceflight. And it's not only my story, it's all of our stories. The premise is that some people were there in the space program on the front lines with their hands on and making history. The rest of us had to watch it on TV. And so this is the story of me, the little kid who grew up sitting in front of the TV set watching these missions, who went from that to somebody who was actually covering them for the news media at the KSC press site, because I'm now the spaceflight analyst for the Aero News Network.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I got to see STS-135 was the last launch. Got to that by pure happenstance because we had scheduled our vacation over that launch day, and my wife actually adjusted the vacation because she said it was only appropriate that if I saw the first one, I had to see the second or the last one. And so it was sort of an alpha omega, and I got to see the first one, I got to see the first 7, and then I got to see the last one from the press site.
All right, well, Wes Olszewski with Dr. Zuch, thanks very much for talking to us.
And you can get my books on Amazon.com. You get them in Kindle form or in print form. Just if you get them in Kindle form, it's really hard for me to autograph them.
Okay. Thanks a lot for talking to us.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Yep.
All right, guys, I got a new job. No, just kidding. I'm here with Matt Steele of North Coast Rocketry. Hey, Matt.
How you doing?
Great. How are you?
Oh, having a great time here.
Yeah. So you did a research and development presentation last night. How do you think that went?
It was a lot of fun to talk to that many people. I was really surprised by how many people were in attendance and like that. And when you're up there, you never quite know how well you do. But everybody told me they were interested at the end, so I guess it went really well.
Yeah, I found it really, really fascinating, and it was one of those, some research and development topics are so dense that I have a hard time wrapping my head around it. But what I found about yours is that while it was really rich on information, it was also something that I could understand. Mass and drag and staging and that kind of stuff. It was really, really fascinating. But we are here at the vendors room, and we would like to talk to you about your upcoming stuff for North Coast Rocketry. Apparently you've got some new stuff coming out.
Yeah, I definitely have some fun stuff that's getting ready to come out. And the first thing I've got is we're going to bring out a hobgoblin. Okay, and I don't know if you saw on the Facebook page, but I posted the old North Coast hobgoblin that we did years and years ago that was around an 8-inch tube. It was a great flyer and like that, but I'm not doing 8-inch models anymore, so we decided to come back and do a 2.6-inch diameter scale-up of the old Goblin. So kind of use the same inspired decals, although I have the little demon is a lot faster and my bats are meaner than the ones on the original and like that, and so it's just going to be a fun little flyer for F&G Motors and like that, and so that one will be coming out shortly, probably within a month. So not too far away.
Nice, very nice. And then we've got these cool motor retainers coming up. Would you like to tell us about those?
So I've been trying to do a nice motor retainer design for the North Coast kits for 2 or 3 years, and I've had a whole bunch of different iterations and wasn't really happy with what I was coming up with, or it wasn't really producible, or it wasn't practical, and so I've been doing a lot of 3D designing and everything like that. And about 2 months ago, I hit on the idea is that if I leveraged off what Estes used on their screw-on retainer, that could be a good idea. But my only problem is on the Estes ones, it's just a knob. And it's like, that's not the way it should be. Rockets have nozzles at the aft end, not knobs. And so I came up with a design that'll let us incorporate a nozzle detail in the back of that and be part of the motor retainer. So the kit you're going to get from North Coast, it'll be an add-on, is you get the screw-on piece that goes on the motor tube, and then you get the screw-on cap, but you'll actually bond that in a simulated nozzle as like that, and that'll be your motor retainer. And the fun part about that is then you'll add that to the back of the model, and it'll look cool because it's a it's a nozzle on the back, so it'll enhance all the existing kits. So I got 3 different designs done. I did kind of what I call a typical solid rocket motor nozzle. I have what I call a liquid rocket motor nozzle. And then this one's inspired by the back of the Star Destroyer, so it's kind of cool in a different way, and like that. And those will be available as a separate add-on kit. It's interchangeable, so any one of the kits that you have with the Estes retainer for 29 millimeter, this will fit on as well. Obviously, you'll still have to check to make sure the stability is okay when you add that much weight at the back, but that's the thing. And then I'll eventually go and do a 24 millimeter set as well once I get this up and running. So I'm pretty excited about that because it's something that looks cool, and it's like, that's the way things should be.
Yeah, I think these are really neat. I mean, this looks a lot like the bell on the back of an F1 engine.
Yeah.
You know, that's really cool.
It's kind of designed to inspire.
That sort of looks like an SRB, bell sort of end, and these are really cool. These are really neat.
Yep.
I think that's fantastic. Well, good luck on. They haven't announced the results of the R&D yet, have they?
No, not yet. So I don't. There were so many good projects. It wouldn't bother me if they just divided up the money equally and awarded everybody tied for first place, because there were some really interesting things. We've gone from doing R&D at NARMS, they're trying to move it into the NARCON, and I think this is a really good first start because the quality of the projects was not the least bit degraded by moving it here, and maybe we'll even get to do it twice a year. It'll be interesting to see. But
yeah, I think it's interesting because sometimes you get a project where the results show that maybe you need some more research, and then that opens up the possibility of presenting first at NARCON and then developing a follow-up at NARM.
Yeah, so like I say, it should be interesting. And rocketry is different than the other aero modeling sports where they don't have research and development. I mean, people will publish some articles in the magazines or like that, but they don't really have a competition that promotes the development and the hobby. And that's what's made model rocketry special since the early years, is that science aspect has been an integral part of the whole process. And that's what makes it fun. And as you can see, we've been doing this 60-some years, and there's still lots of questions to be answered. There's no way anybody knows all the things that are going on in a lot of this. And those reports last night showed that there's new stuff being done every year.
Yeah, well, just one last thing. So, what since you've done this, what do you think? What makes a good research and development project?
Well, all my kids ended up doing them over the years, so I've supervised a whole bunch besides doing them myself. The biggest thing is identify a little project that you want to do, and then make sure it's focused enough that you don't have this great big scope, that you just focus on one thing. The kids would come and they'd have these grand ideas, and it's like, well, why don't you just pick this aspect, and tell me if this kind of launch lug works better than this rail guide, instead of let's survey everything and include a piston and a tower and something else like that. And so if you can get a nicely defined little project where you can then go out and get enough data to get what you think is a believable answer, those tend to make the best projects, because you can come up with an answer and a conclusion and have enough confidence that your data is good. And so, the biggest thing is you don't bite off more than you can chew when you do one of these projects. So I think those are fun. And then, things that are out there that advance the state of the art is always cool. And it seems like every year somebody comes up with something that just makes you sit back and go, oh, wow, this is going to go interesting places. And so that's part of the fun.
All right, well, thanks very much. That is Matt Steele of North Coast Rocketry. All right, now we are talking to Randy Bodway of E-Rockets. Hi, Randy.
Hi, how you doing?
Doing great. How are you doing?
Excellent.
How are things at E-Rockets?
Things are excellent at E-Rockets, and Semrock especially, because, we carry the entire line of Semrock in our building. We actually manufacture those products, and we have 3 new products out right now. We've got the Helicopter, which is a little A-motor helicopter rocket. It's got a drop fin can, and then the blades pop up, and it helicopters back down. So that's an exciting kit. Came out in December. And now, this weekend, we are releasing the Blue Jay. And the Blue Jay is a fun kit. It's a Delta-type glider. It's got some great engineering points on it. It's got a heavy-duty keel. So that's an area that commonly breaks in a glider like this. Typically, a glider like this has a break point in the front. We're beefing that up with a double layer of balsa and a glue joint that comes across. So this is a great opportunity to build a heavy-duty glider. It attaches to the pod using a double hook system. which is fantastic. And if you look real closely right here at the hook when it comes apart, as this hook moves forward, as the glider moves forward, it forces the glider away from the pod.
Oh, yeah.
So that's an excellent way to prevent a red baron or any other issues. And then last but not least, it's called the Blue Jay, and just for marketing purposes, we put a Blue Jay head on the front of the rocket.
Oh, cool.
So
that is cool.
It's a little Blue Jay. You put a little clay in the eye, and that gives you plenty of weight to make it stable and trimmed. All right. Next, we have over here our maple seed, and this rocket will go up a couple hundred feet, and at apogee, it drops all its seeds.
Oh, wow.
So now these seeds turn into little helicopters that come spinning down. I'm not going to throw it in the room because I've already lost one up in the light fixture, but that's okay. I brought extra because I knew something could happen. But anyway, that's a brand new kit, just became available. In the near future, we're going to be coming out with the little Augie. It's not really that little. This is the SLS version, so it's the Semrock Large Series. It takes a black powder motor from Estes. We're throwing an F15 in here, so an F15-0 will light a upper stage motor down below, and you can see on the inside where your second motor would then light. Because the second motor is lighting in a chamber and drawing the air through the top, it howls, or maybe you could say it growls. Anyway, the only things we have to finish up on this is we've got to finish the decal. There'll be black decals that'll go on this, and then finish the instructions, and this will be out later this summer.
Oh, wow.
So that's kind of it in a nutshell. We do have some new rocket stands that are out. These are a two-pack is $4, so they're very inexpensive. And then we've got some of our regular kits that we've been producing. You know, egg lofting is really a lot of fun with the TARC teams, etc. So egg lofting continues to be a good thing. We also brought the Mars lander along, and of course you've got the spring-loaded fins for landing. This is always a fun model. And then this is the Hydra 7. We brought it along this time. It's a 7-motor cluster.
Oh, wow, that's a really interesting looking kit, too.
So it is, and it's a skill level 4 kit, so there's a lot of cutting and a lot of work that has to be done to bring this together. So that's basically it from Semrock right now. We do have a new catalog out. So Estes didn't have a catalog, but we do this year. And it's going to have all 125 kits in it as soon as we finish it. We've got a few more pages that have to go in yet.
Well, you know, I think you have one of those clubs that everyone's jealous of because in Dayton, the local club gets to have their meetings at your store, eRockets.
Absolutely. We keep a huge area for building. It's a lot of fun. You've seen the videos on the Facebook page. That's where we usually throw them out there. And it's just a blast to see what all the different kids are building and then what the adults are building too, because we'll be building anything from a small rocket like an Estes Mosquito all the way up to a level 2 or level 3 project, all going on at the same time in the same building. And it's great having the camaraderie there and people really discussing the engineering and everything that's going on with something like that.
How did you get in this business?
All by accident, of course. I've been in retail for many, many years, and I kept getting downsized. And so my wife and I talked, and we said, well, what would it take to get eRockets going and be able to do that full time? And at the time, we had to double business. So we went back, and we took a year, and we doubled the business, and here we are today.
Well, that's great. You know, and I think a lot of us are really grateful that you have managed to rescue Semrock. I know that I got involved in rocketry just a couple of years ago, and as I was looking around for stuff that wasn't just Estes kits, I kept hearing about this Semrock, and shortly after I got involved, it seemed like Semrock was going away, and then came the news that eRockets was purchasing it. So I think we all just kind of want to say thanks for doing that.
You bet. We've had a blast bringing it back to life. Just keep buying those Semrock kits, folks, because we need to sell a lot more. And if you have a local hobby shop that needs Semrock kits, send them our way. We'll be glad to get them going on it, because we do wholesale selling to these local hobby shops and stuff, and there's no better way to grow the hobby. So, help us out.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Randy. Randy Bodway of eRockets. Okay, now we are at the Aerotech table, and we are here with Gary Rosenfield of Aerotech. Hey, Gary.
How you doing, Daniel?
Great. How are you doing?
Not bad.
Are you enjoying NARCON so far?
I am, just a little jet lagged, but other than that, I'm doing fine.
It was a long evening last night, and it's going to be a long day today. But so we've got some new stuff here from Aerotech, and I was wondering if you wanted to tell us about it.
We do, actually quite a bit. So we'll start off with the new kits.
Absolutely.
We have a new Level 1, Level 2 kit called the Monstra. It's a 4-inch kit, similar to the G-Force, but it's set up for 38mm motor mounts. It's using Aeropack 38mm motor retainer and one Bad Hawk recovery harness. So it's a premium setup for Level 1, Level 2 certification. So it's our first Level 2 capable kit. These kits will be out, by the way, in the spring.
Oh, great.
The second new kit is the Aerobee High, which is spelled differently than the original scale kit. Kind of a play on words.
Oh, the Aero.
Yeah. Aerotech General instead of Aerojet General, all that stuff. But this was designed by Bob Sanford, who also designed the Initiator for us way back when.
This is a cool kit. This looks really amazing.
Yeah, it's a kind of a pseudo scale. I mean, somebody just looking at it, just taking a glance at it, is going to think it's an Aerobee, a real.
They're going to think it's a real sounding rocket. Yeah.
So this one is set up with a 29mm motor mount with the Aerotech motor retainer and no motor block. This should be able to take H motors with no problem.
Nice. And what are the fins? I noticed the fins are shaped. This is
actually, I think, the Tomahawk fin shape. So it's an existing fin that we're using, and these are the strakes from the Warthog kit. So we're making double duty of that's what we try to do, is get the most out of the parts that we have. This will be the first kit that has that are new rail guides. These are 3D printed rail guides. So we're ditching the launch lugs.
Yeah, those are nice. Those are nice. Those are very nice.
Yeah, they are, and they'll just work with a standard rail, as well as the other kits too. So all the kits are now coming with rail guides, and as well with the
motor retainer.
Motor retainer. So my labels for the boxes were late. They just came in. After we talk, I'll be putting them on so you can see the artwork on the box. And this one's a cradle box kit, which just means that it's got the little cradle built into the bottom of the box. You can use it as a display stand.
That's helpful.
Yeah. So that's the kit part of it. We're introducing a new motor called it's the F67. It's in the Economax line, and the current Economax line is the F44 and the G74. And the whole idea behind this particular product line is it's meeting some kind of a limit, or trying to get the maximum performance out of something. So the 24mm F44 is a maximum performance you can get out of that particular D-size casing. The 24mm, 70mm case. The G74 was the maximum performance we could get out of the 29mm Econojet casing. So this one is the maximum performance you can get out of 30 grams of propellant.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So these are U.S. mailable, whereas the G74 was not, because it's like 40-something grams of propellant.
So does that mean that these do not carry a hazmat fee?
Correct. There'll be no hazmat fee necessary for these. So they're about 65 newton seconds, which is, I don't know, it's quite a bit more than the usual Econojet performance. So these should be really snappy with all the kits, and good performance, and they'll be priced somewhere between the other two Economax motors. So.
And when do you expect these to actually hit the market?
They're being submitted for certification. I expect a few months.
Okay.
Hopefully sometime during the spring, we should have them available.
That's awesome.
So these utilize our kind of we call it a super white lightning, even though they're just called white lightning, but it's a higher performance white lightning that has a higher ISP. The smoke isn't quite as dense, but it's got a really brilliant white flame, and when the motor shuts down, it's a core burner, so when it shuts down, it's like a light turning off. So you see this bright light and it just disappears.
Wow.
Pretty impressive to watch. Another thing we'll show, we're going to give an update on this. We kind of let the cat out of the bag on our little composite ABCD motors that we're working on this, but to replace the black powder Quest motors. We've made some good progress with it. We've still got some work to do. I'm hoping we'll be able to have a more definitive answer by in a few months where we are with this, but we're getting close.
Well, I know that's pretty exciting news. People have been missing those Quest motors for a long time, but to have an 18 millimeter single-use composite motor, I think people are going to be really excited about that, especially one that's just the standard size. You just pop it in a model rocket and go. And can you tell us a little more about them, or you got to keep quiet about it until further notice?
Well, I got to keep somewhat quiet about it, but they use a pressed ceramic nozzle, a plastic casing, and the interior construction is similar to an existing motor. In other words, cartridge-loaded propellant.
Okay,
it's kind of lending itself to an automated process. So we're hoping that we'll be able to add automation to the production over time.
Okay, great. And these are manufactured in the U.S. now, or they will be?
Yeah, they'll be made right at our plant in Cedar City, Utah.
Oh, great. So we won't have to worry about shipping from overseas.
No, that was one of the horrible things. Was our vendor was increasing the cost of the motors, and then the cost of transportation, if we didn't buy just huge quantities, was just unworkable. So that's why we decided to do this. But it's been a 3-year project.
Yeah. Well, it's very exciting, and I know that people have been wondering about those Quest motors for a long time, and it's nice to have like an update like this is really happening, folks. I think people are pretty excited about it.
We've actually have some samples that we believe passed certification already, so now we got to work out some of the manufacturing issues. Yeah. So we're getting there. It's just this has been one of the most difficult projects I've ever worked on. You would think it would have been one of the easier ones, but for me it was easier to develop an end motor than develop this.
Yeah, well, working with small parts, it's got to be a challenge.
And keeping the cost down, where you're trying to compete with a paper casing and black powder propellant, but our material costs are actually pretty low. It's going to be the labor that we have to work on.
Okay. All right. We got motors.
So this is a new reload kit. I'll show you the package and not the parts because it looks like any other reload kit pretty much, except that there's been, because of the increase in hazmat fees and so on, there have been no J motors that have been available that have been, like a level 2 motor that are U.S. mailable. So we decided to start investigating U.S. mailable reloads in 38 millimeter. Last year we brought out the H130 and the I180. Those are 4 and 6 grain reloads that go in the 2 and 3 grain hardware. So they're short, small grains. So we said, well, can we make a J motor that can be U.S. mailable? And we've done it.
Really?
Yeah, it's a 13 grain reload kit that fits in the 38 1080 case. So
wow.
Yeah, it's a little more of a hassle in terms of how many grains you have to put in, but you can save the hazmat fee.
No kidding.
And so we're anxious to look forward to that. The other thing is, the last thing is a new DMS single-use motor. Again, it uses that super white lightning propellant that's in the F67 single-use motor, and it's a 38 millimeter single-use. I've got it disassembled so people can see the innards, but of course it'll be assembled when you buy it. It's the 38 fiberglass casing, and it also has our 3D printed thrust ring, which are new. It's got that really bright white flame that shuts off really fast. So it's a little more impulse. It's a little over 700 Newton seconds, kind of close to a J350.
That's very exciting.
So that's what we're showing here at NARCON. We're constantly working on other things as well, but this is what we can talk about now.
Well, this is great, and I think this is all really exciting stuff.
Thank you.
Congratulations, and good luck completing that stuff with the Quest.
Right.
Thanks very much, Gary Rosenfield of Aerotech.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
That was fun. All right, welcome back to the Rocketry Show, NARCON 2017, and we are here with Jim Berriman, who most of our listeners know because he is the person who made it easier for model rocketeers to determine that their rockets would be stable before they built them, as they were designing them, through what are known as the Berriman equations, which enabled rocketeers to determine the static center of pressure of a model rocket based on simple mathematics, or not terribly simple mathematics, but it was based
probably high school or even junior high school.
High school or junior high school, and you based this. You used to work with sounding rockets, is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, I started my career at NASA as a sounding rocket performance engineer.
And so how did you go from doing that to now a lot of people start with model rockets and they move into sounding rockets, but
Right.
did you decided you want to do both?
Well, I'd done sounding rocket analysis for a number of years. Well, not even a number of years, for a few years. As a matter of fact, I started before I actually graduated. I was a co-op student where I went to school part-time and I worked part-time. And so I was working with the sounding rocket division at Goddard even before I graduated. And then after I graduated, I was using existing programs and existing analysis techniques. But then I started refining and doing my own analysis techniques. They were trying to expand what tools were available for aerodynamics as well as trajectory analysis. And I enjoyed that work. It was really great. But I was a sounding rocketeer without any rockets, because everything I did was based on the dimensions and the information on the rockets, but I never touched a rocket.
Yeah.
I wasn't there flying the rockets. I was giving the guys information to make sure that they would fly the way they wanted them to. But there are other guys in the division who would actually go to the launch ranges and fly them. Well, I got jealous. I wanted to fly rockets too. Okay, well, guess what? Model rockets was the way to do that. And so I was able to combine the two, both analyzing and flying. And by model rocketry, I was able to get the practical experience that I was missing strictly as an analysis engineer. So model rocketry was a great outlet for me. It turned out that I was with a group of youngsters who were just brilliant guys, young, high school, junior high school, who were just superb, and they were very competitive. Okay, this was the NARHAM's Model Rocket Club, still in existence as it turns out.
You're very well known.
And flying regularly. And so I had a chance to not just fly rockets, but to be with people and with youngsters that were just exciting to be with. Okay, some of them were a little wild and woolly. We had to rein them in, and we were also good pals with fellow model rocket clubs in the area. It turned out that the Washington area had a lot of rocket clubs, particularly in the mid-Maryland area. We had the Star Spangled Banner section. We had the Annapolis Rocketeers. There were just a lot of rocketry going on, and we not only built and flew rockets, but we started holding large regional contests where a lot of people would come from as far away as in South Carolina, over in Pennsylvania and Ohio. And we had there's a regional meet called ECRM that we started way back in like 66 or so, 67, and it's still going on. It's not flying as often, but we flew, back then we flew rockets, or we flew the number of contestants were on the order of 1 to 200. which is greater than most of the rocket meets there are even these days. And we came up with different ways to fly them rapidly so we can get a lot of rockets flown. I went down to Fort A.P. Hill in Virginia, and this was back when it wasn't that active, so we were able to get in there and use that facility to fly rockets, and they were excited to have us there. So I had a chance to do some different things that I wouldn't have been able to do because I got involved in model rocketry. And so it did a lot for me. Model rocketry was a great hobby and a great learning experience in ways that analysis of rockets wouldn't have allowed me to learn.
Yeah. And so a lot of the people in your club, NARHAMs, were very competitive, as you mentioned in your talk.
Right.
And so they came to you and basically expressed that there was a need to figure out this stability thing.
Yes.
And which...
Well, they knew I worked for NASA and all that, and they were just kind of hoping that there was...
Maybe you could do
some
something?
way it could be done. Well, I hadn't even thought about it at that point. I mean, I was used to using some fairly complex analysis techniques that were basically computer-based. But I said, wow, this is, let's give it a try, because it's something that we might be able to make happen. And as I pursued it, turned out, they could happen. You had to make some assumptions about the nature of the thing, but they weren't so far out in left field that they didn't apply to the model rockets that we were flying. So yeah, it turned out it could be done, and I just so happened to I was the guy that was able to do it.
And so when you submitted your R&D report at NARM 8,
right,
where you published this, what was the reaction?
Well, initially disbelief. As a matter of fact, Harry was one of the R&D judges, Harry Stein, and he told me later, he said, when I saw this report, it sounded like too good to be true, okay? And so he was not sympathetic. But what I did to show the judges that I wasn't just blowing smoke is I built a Centuri model, just happened to be a 6-fin model. I still have it, as a matter of fact. That I loaded lead shot in the back end. I built it so there was plenty of room in the very back end around the motor to put lead shot to move the center of gravity quite a ways back. And so during the demonstration flights for the R&D contest, I showed the judges where the rocket balanced, where the CG actually was, and they got nervous. They were saying, this may not fly right. And I said, it will fly perfectly. And when they saw it actually fly, they were on board.
Wow, that's amazing. And then you published you also published a number of technical reports for Centuri.
A couple. One was basically the one that I presented today.
Yeah,
about the concepts of rocket stability. That was a teaching aid. That was more a teaching aid for youngsters to kind of get the idea of what stability was all about and what the concepts were to go into understanding it. So that was an educational thing. And then of course, before I published anything for Centuri, at Goddard Space Flight Center, they had an educational programs office. And it turns out that one of the fellows that was working there was a fellow named Jim Kukowski. Jim Kukowski was the, I'm not sure exactly what his title was, but he was basically running the NAR day-to-day activities. I guess an executive director or whatever. Harry Stein was the president and was the spirit and led the philosophy and making sure that rockets were safe. But Jim did the day-to-day stuff of putting out magazines, keeping track of the membership, that sort of thing. But Jim was every bit as enthusiastic. As a matter of fact, he ran one of the other sections over in Rockville, Maryland, that we were companions with at NARCON. So he was another one of our compatriots in the model rocket business. But he recognized that this was something that Goddard wanted to take credit for, basically, because I based it on stuff I had done for real rocketry.
Right.
And so he talked me into writing up a paper for publication by the Goddard Educational Programs Office. So the first model rocket work that was done, the first center of pressure calculation work that was done for Goddard's educational programs. The other thing that even those equations were a little complex for like junior high school students, although today it's not true because they're so much more sophisticated. But even back in the 60s, the kids needed a little bit more even help with that kind of stuff than they did now. So he talked me into doing a series of graphs, and so they could use graphical techniques to do the calculation, not just use the equations themselves. So the Goddard folks themselves actually saw the value in this, and got me started in publishing this stuff. Well, then I took those same ideas and put them into the Century TIR-33, which had both graphs and the equations built into them. So it was a natural progression, and of course, thinking I was doing it for a commercial company, I'd make some big bucks publishing. Never happened. It wasn't a money-making deal, but it was fine. And it shouldn't have been, because it was based on what one would call public domain information. That is based on the work that had already been done under the taxpayer's dollar. Now, I didn't do the simplification with the taxpayer's dollar, but the foundation of all the work was based on work that was done, paid for by Uncle Sam.
Yeah. Well, I have read the Century TIR-30, which I found very helpful when I was learning about this stuff.
Good.
And I only got involved I got involved in this as a grown-up. So but I found it so useful that when I taught model rocket camp a couple summers ago.
Okay.
And I had plenty of time with the kids, so I taught them the basics of stability. We didn't just build a few rockets and launch.
Right.
I taught them the basics of stability, and I used that as a sort of as a text, because it's available on the internet.
Right.
And they got it. They really understood it. I mean, I didn't have to resort to the mathematics, which for a summer camp was probably not the way to go.
Right.
Especially since
what level? What ages?
11 to 14.
11 to 14. That's just right there at the sweet spot. It's more in the junior high than high school level.
Yeah. And so I gave them all printed copies of it, and I think they found it very useful. And I feel it helped them to learn a little bit about the physics of rocketry and make it more interesting than just putting something together, flying it, losing it in a tree. And so I think that it was very useful. And I just think well, I'm thrilled to meet you, because I think that you've done a lot for us, and I don't think rocketry would be at all what it is today without the work that you've done. And so
thank you for saying that. That's nice.
So
one of the things I mentioned in my talk today was, as I was putting that whole thing together, I realized that the work that I did was back in the mid-'60s, which makes it 50 years old this year. Okay, 50 years old. Now, I felt kind of old as a result, but thank heavens I don't feel old all the time. Just that realization of that number just kind of hit me between the eyes, and oh my, it's been around quite a while.
Well, the good thing about those equations is they still work.
Well, it's interesting. My granddaughters, I have 5 granddaughters, and every now and then they come up and say, "Grandpa, you're famous." they find it out, talking to their friends and stuff, that they know the name.
Oh yeah.
And that makes them feel real good. It's a bit of an ego trip for me, but for the most part, I'm scared that it's overblown.
Well, I don't think there have been that many R&D reports that have had quite the impact that yours did, and so it's nice to hear that you're still humble.
Well,
but I think we're all really appreciative of the work that you've done, and we're really appreciative for you taking the time to talk to us today.
Well, I enjoyed it, and I think what you guys are doing here is just a fabulous thing. Educational activity like this is what it's all about in my book. And I'm really tickled to see you guys doing this, and I wish you well.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
That's Jim Berriman, the Jim Berriman of the Berriman Equations, here at NARCON 2017. Thanks a lot, Jim.
Thank you.
Okay, so I know you're not going to believe me, but there's an airplane right behind me. You probably can't see it because it's invisible. It is known as a stealth aircraft. But believe me, there is actually an airplane right behind me. See, if I shout at it, which I'm not going to do because I don't want to disturb people, but if I were to shout at it, my voice wouldn't come back because it would absorb the sound. See, that's how stealth works. Also, it's invisible. There is an airplane here, right? Am I wrong about that?